of my talk is going to be time for framework-agnostic apps. Obviously, this is a TypeScript Meetup of Berlin, November 2022. Let me present myself. Hi there, I'm Emma, short name of Emanuel. I'm from Argentina. I'm a front-end engineer at Revolut, but this talk is not going to cover anything related with Revolut. Don't worry. It's in my free time. I'm an open source enthusiast, writer, cook, and also AI enthusiast. So this picture that you're seeing here, I created today playing around like TV, Berlin Tower, plus code, artistic style, before, like some, I don't know. I can share the prompt later. But yeah, let's start the talk with some poll. So I want here people in the room to raise a hand, someone who has used React. I guess that a lot because that was the Angular. Then we have Preact. Nice. Then we have Vue. Okay. Svelte. This one is tricky. Solid.js. Look at that guy.
Like in production?
No, like just ever use it for fun in a hobby project. Just like, what is this? Lead.js from Google. Last one, and this one's kind of, oh my God, I forgot the name. No, it's for static sites. Let's move on, sorry. But what I'm trying to say is like all these frameworks, if you think about it, are tackling the same problem. And in many situations, they might seem like they're doing that. You know, we are always trying to build, like in a way, like compose our UI. And something that I see when working with different UI frameworks is that some components are only available under one framework. Like in React, we have so many components, but when we move to Svelte, we are lacking a lot. Also, the ways of coding differs a lot. Like we use hooks in React, in Vue we use this kind of bidirectional data flow with kind of linked data between components and the UI. And yeah, it might create some confusion when working between them. And also, this is what really, what is, in my opinion, really annoying. We are rewriting the same thing over and over. Like this is an example. We have Beautify for Vue, React for MUI Core, Svelte, called SMUI, Angular. And these are all examples of libraries that are building material design components. And just to do this, that's it. And it's, in my opinion, it's a little bit silly. So why argue for which framework to use? Just put them all together. And this is what my talk is going to cover. So this should be, in my future mind, possible, right? So let's say that we have a React header, then there is here that we pass this prop, title my app. Then we have our Svelte form that we pass some kind of callback, our Vue result written in Vue, and then we kind of share the state between this other helper. So this is actually possible with a framework called, or a library called Bit. I don't know how many of you have used it. It's basically quite similar. Yeah, thank you for raising the hand. It's very similar, or it's the same idea as Webpack. So it's kind of the competition about it. But the simplest way to define it is just two parts. It's a dev server and a build command. The dev server provides ES native modules when we are building, so it's super fast. Actually, this is what they say in their page, because they are not bundling when we are running in dev mode. And also, they're providing very hot module replacement. And then the other part of it is they have the build command, which is, this can be kind of opinionated because there are two different parts, but it's built with rollup, and yeah, they say it's pre-configured for highly output. I personally see it very fast when it comes to development. For build, it depends what you're measuring. And the cool thing, and this is why I'm bringing it for the TypeScript, it has out-of-the-box support for TypeScript, JS, TypeScript for sure, but then all the post-CSS, JSX and everything. So that's pretty nice. And the main thing that I personally love about Bit is that it comes with plugins. And the idea is that in case we want to enhance our project, we can just simply add a plugin. And in case you're wondering, yes, we can add plugins for frameworks. So it's actually quite simple to build a setup like this, where we add our plugin for React, plugin for Vue, plugin for Svelte, and then we have, in theory, we can render components right away, as I showed before. But when we are building something, for example, there's things that we need to care about, like what about the routing? What about the data fetching? What about state management, asset optimization, SEO practices? Bit doesn't care about, or at least it's not their main goal. And luckily, someone already, that's the gift that someone is very annoying. Luckily, someone thought about it. And this is the framework I want to share today. Maybe you heard, or maybe you didn't hear about Astro. And the cool thing is powered by Bit. It's from the developers of Snowpack. And Snowpack, it's now, they don't maintain it anymore. But it was the main idea as Bit, like shipping these modules directly, so it's super fast. They released their 1.0 version like this year in August. And the main idea is like you bring your own framework. That's what I've shared before. And what they compare it is that, yeah, they said that it's super fast. Because what they do by default, they don't ship any JS. And this is going to come a little bit controversial because we have been talking about like using different frameworks. But then you say, OK, what do I win without React, like if I don't use JS, right? But what they built on top was something called client hydration that I'm going to explain later. And the cool thing is, recently with one of the latest versions, they added the option to have server-side rendering. But when it was launched, it was only a static site. But let's take a look at how it works, just to understand a bit. So the main idea is Astro is built on this architecture called Astro Island. At the first time, it looks very similar to micro frontend, but it's not at the application level, it's at the component level. So all these boxes that you see are components that can receive props and can pass callbacks and data. And the idea is that in these boxes, you can use any framework that you want, or if you don't want any, just use plain HTML and CSS. And then Astro will generate, in the beginning, like will render all the different boxes, and it will strip down all the JavaScript. So your page is going to be static and super fast. And this is what they say in their landing page. And then if a component requires JS, you can tell Astro using client directives. And in order to explain it, the best way is to, OK. I cover it later. But this is more or less how the component look like. So let's say that we have here our import of components. In this case, I'm importing an Astro component and a React component. Here we have the props definition. The nice thing is like the props, this is as well like inherit from Bit. TypeScript is out of the box. So we can define our props here, and then it's already kind of knows that the props are coming because they're defined there. We are going to have a title. So they're linked automatically. Then this is 2 examples of fetching data. This is going to be for server-side rendering, where we fetch our data using a normal fetch call. And then this is the case that we want to fetch some data using some parameters from the URL. This syntax is kind of similar to what Next is doing, where we have our call async away, and our components will load the data, and then we pass to the render. And this is going to be our render. So we can render directly HTML and also mix it with JavaScript expressions, very similar to JSX, what we're doing in React. And here there's an example of loading the Astro component, which in theory shouldn't have any JS, like client JS. And in case we want to render a framework like React, we need to specify the client directive. And then we can pass like a callback for any prop that they are using. And lastly, we have the style tag. And this is something that I personally really like. All the styles that we define here, like in this case, h1, that refers to that title, is going to be scope. So Astro is going to create a class that is going to be unique for this component. So any other h1 on other component is not going to be affected by it. So this is what I wanted to show before. I made this nice interactive example of directives because there are a lot of them. And I think the easiest way to do it is with just see it real life. So first of all, what happens if we have the example of our counter. Counter is a button that when you click adds 1. It's the classic example of any framework. When we don't pass any directive, our button doesn't work. It's just displays because it's been rendered on the server, but it doesn't have any JS. If you specify the directive of client load, what it does is as soon as the component is as soon as the client gets the HTML, we're going to load the JS as soon as possible. So we have the counter working. Next one, we have client idle. And this one is when we receive the HTML, and then the browser will parse it. And there's this moment in the loop that our browser is not doing any high maintenance, or we have this moment that our browser is idle basically. Then we're going to fetch the JS. And this is great because it's not going to impact so much our metrics for the first painted and first time interactable. And then obviously here we're idle, so we have that. Next one, we have client visible and client media. I grouped them together because they're based on some CSS, let's say, conditions. So they have the lowest priority because we need to understand the viewport and some other stuff. So in the case of the visible, the component is going to be visible when the user actually sees it. And this is great for components that are right at the bottom of our page, and we don't care about loading the JS until the user can actually use them. In this case, it's visible. And media, it's great. So media, it's when the component match some kind of media query. So in this case, my component is going to be interactable when this media query is true. So in this case, when the mean width is, so when the width of the screen is higher than that, it's going to be interactable. And in this case, this is not. It's a bigger page. That's why. When I was running it, my computer was not working. But this is a great example when it comes to responsive websites that we have some sidebar, and then we're doing this kind of navigations. And sometimes our layout changes. And Astro is really specific to say, OK, I don't want to load this component. And maybe I'm hiding it with CSS. But because of that, I'm still loading the JS. And then lastly, we have client only. And this is kind of specific. So what it does is it just loads the JS in the client. It doesn't do server-side rendering. And also, it's interactable, right? So the idea for this is sometimes we don't want to do server-side rendering because maybe our components are not prepared for that. So this is a way just to skip it. So something I didn't cover yet is state management. So you might be thinking, how do you do state management when you have so different frameworks? Like every framework does different ways, like context, and then as well have stores. But that's also solved. So we are using something called nano stores. They actually recommend it in the documentation of Astro. And it's pretty nice. It's the same concept of atomic stores, very similar to what Facebook did with Recoil. So we can define atoms, and our atoms have a get and a set here. And those are the basic directives. And then also what NanoStore is doing, they are shipping some other like sub-packages depending on the framework that you're using. So in case you want to use nano stores with React, you already have a hook for it. And then here we are reading the list of users and then mapping through it. And let's say that we are working in Svelte. We can just simply get the helper that we defined here. And then when we are calling the submit of our user form, then we are going to communicate it. So in theory, if we add a user here, then we should see it on this list. So it's a, I don't know, it's a very simplified Redux without all the reducers. Yeah, the main thing is like framework agnostic. So there is one for Svelte, Angular, Vue, like, and the list goes on and on. So let's go on a demo time. I built a website, obviously with Astro. And the cool thing, so in the beginning, you might see that, yeah, this is like a dashboard. But the great thing is like it's built with 3 different frameworks, Vue, React, and Svelte. And if you click this button here, we can see from which component this, from which framework this component comes from. And in this case, we have the banner. It was from Vue. Here, the cards from Vue, Svelte, and then this is React. They're using also different versions, different packages of material design. So I know the pain. And the last thing is that when we click on it, they are communicating. And yeah, like communication is being done with nano stores. And I personally think this was the easiest part to do it. And then also here we have a table that also is built with Svelte. Yeah, so that was the demo. Let's take a look a little bit at the code. So in the beginning, I was going to do a live coding, but I realized that it was going to be easier to show it like this. So basically, it's one page, kind of old school approach, where we have mostly everything. So it's very similar to the example that I did. First, we have all the imports for all the different components. So we have Astro, React, Svelte, Vue. Here we have our fetching the data. I selected from dummy.json.com/products and then parsing the products. We did very opinionated as, but it was the easiest way to do it. And then this is the juicy part. So for all the different components that we want interactions to happen, we need to specify the client directives. In this case, the highlighter toggle was this icon that when you click, it pops everything. Then we have the highlighter wrapper. And in my opinion, that part was pretty cool because it shows that we can compose this component is React, this component is Vue. Then depending on the component, we might want to use different directives. So in the case of the category chart, I use recharts to make that. It's a React component for charts and was not server-side render friendly. And the first paint was simply horrible. And then I say, OK, you know what? No server-side. And then we just find client-only React. And it worked great, honestly. And then in the case of the table that is right at the bottom, I just put client visible. So I don't need to load the JS for that. And then here we have the stores that I use. It's very simple state. So we have the Boolean to show or not this wrapper for the framework highlighter. And then the categories when we are clicking the different tabs and it's changing the graphs. So I use an array of strings. And then here, this is, I'm not going to put all the code of the components, but this is the one for the tags. And it shows that here we are reading this state from the categories. And this is Svelte, by the way. It's kind of similar to Astro. But the idea is that here we have the render, there's the categories, and then when we click on it, this kind of has a bind on both sides. Then we're going to set the categories of our stores with the categories that are not selected in the component. And this has like an internal state. So yeah, I mean, and in case you want to check all the code, that's the GitHub. It's an open source project. So let's go with the takeaways of what we learned today. So first of all, Bit provides a dev server and a bundler for our app. Then we have a Bit application can be enhanced with the usage of plugins. Astro is built on Bit and use the island architecture. An island can use any framework to render the content. Each component has a specified client directive to be interactive. And the application state is being shared using nanostores. And yeah, I wanted to leave you with these last things of npm trams. So this is great to understand how a library is doing. And I actually pick all the different frameworks that I use today. I actually don't know what's going on with the spell this week. It grew like crazy. I'm super happy, by the way. But obviously, we have React at the top. So this makes you think, what happens if we can combine all these communities together and we can actually build better application and stop making the same button over and over and over. So yeah, that's it. Thank you so much. And that's a link for the app in case you, for the slides. Any question?
Yeah. So imagine there's a typical situation where companies say, so imagine the company developed something in Angular.js a long time ago, and they say, now we want to replace some bits with these frameworks. We have independent teams, and we just replace bits by bits. And would Astro help introduce this kind of bit replacement? Or
yeah, so it really depends on the application. So I also thought about it, like what can be the good use cases. Just to remind you, like Astro is a static site generator or server side. So if your application is fully client side, like SPA, then it's going to be complicated. So you have to move it first to some kind of like server side rendering approach. And then you can install the plugin of Angular. There is a plugin for that as well. And then you can start the migration. And the cool thing is that this migration is going to be at the component level. So
imagine you just, put this to the server side, and then you created this ginormous Angular.js bit that's basically the whole portal, and that they say, now we want this like a personal account page to be replaced with a React instance.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, it's possible to do it like that. I wouldn't like to have a project with so many different frameworks together. I think it's great for migrations. Like, it's good to have like a goal, like that you're building. Or again, in case there is a component that you're using Angular, you say, oh, in React we have this that is much better. Like, don't rebuild it. Just install this component. Install the plugin, render it. By the time that you keep the interfaces quite like with product declaration, it shouldn't be a problem, I think.
But from the way I see it, it seems like you still have to wrap every bit in your app in Astro. Astro is your basically kind of a bag in which you just drop different bits.
Yeah, Astro will be your like wrapper, and then inside of it you're going to render the components. But I mean, something that you can consider here, because these are all static websites or server-side websites, you can split your projects in between routes. That's actually the cool thing about it. So you can avoid the monolith of having your full-blown front-end application by splitting the routes.
Yeah, but it feels like you have to start with Astro. If someone says, we're going to build something like a monolith, and say, Astro, let's go with Astro first.
Yeah,
but if they already say, we've got a monolith, it feels like you really need like a really big bag to put the whole thing into Astro.
Yeah, I mean,
I kind of get it.
I see your point. All right.
Cool.
Thank you. Any other question?
We usually have the throwy cube, but... Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your talk. It was super interesting to see Astro. The takeaway I have is that Astro is great if you want to mix and match components from different libraries. Depending on the application I work on, maybe I don't need that many third-party components. Apart from that mix and matching, what are the other benefits of Astro? Why should I use different frameworks in the same app?
So I think it's I cover it here. Let me quickly go. When I was talking, what does it? Not the Spider-Man. I think it's here. No. Timetable something. Yeah. So basically all these things, if you think about it, Astro provides you with routing. The routing is very similar to what Next is doing with the file-based routing. I didn't explain that because otherwise it's going to be too long. It also provides you with data fetching, so with this kind of async await fetch, which I personally really like. The state management, well, we cover it with NanoStore, so it's kind of solved. And then these two are great, in my opinion. They have already asset optimization for all the images that you want to load. They optimize it properly. And, well, it have good SEO because it's a static site. And also you can enhance it with plugins as well. So I think that what Astro brings here, I personally think that all these things are possible because of Bit. So the main player here is Bit. Actually, when I was building the talk, I was thinking, oh, I'm going to talk more about Bit than Astro. But then I realized, no, Astro is great as well. Yeah, I personally see a lot of value on it. And you can build very good applications. And the main selling point that it doesn't ship JavaScript because of this Zero.js that actually makes you very aware when to load JS. I also really like it. And I don't think there is not so many frameworks doing that nowadays.
Cool, thank you.
Any other question? There.
There you go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the talk. Question is, so when we build a React app, usually we are getting like our bundle with our code and bundle with like React library itself, right? And using Astro, so let's say we have like one part of the application React, one part application Angular, for example. When like both of these components will be loaded on client, it means that we will load both React and Angular, right?
I mean, you are just building the parts that you're just building the parts that you are using. So every component, if you use the client directives here, or let's go with this example. Every time you're loading just that header, Astro is going to load the specific part of what is needed. So what you're saying is like if we are like, let's say that we're using many React components, if you're loading React many times.
No, this also would be next question maybe. But I mean, for rendering any React component, we need React. Like React has rendering engine that should run.
So the rendering engine, just remember that it has the server side rendering. So that can happen. So
it's already happened on backend.
It happens in the backend, and then what we do with client directives is to hydrate, so to give them interactable approach. So the rendering, the core part is done in the server, and then in the client we ship normally the JS that the client needs to make it work.
Result of the rendering, basically.
Yeah.
Already. Okay.
Except we are going for the client only approach, and then we are rendering. Then I don't know what happens there. I might have to check.
Yeah, probably I will try and see
Okay.
what happens.
Thank you. Oh, do we have time for more questions, or I don't know?
Sure. Knock yourself out.
So let's say that two companies are merging and they are basically doing the same thing. So we have a Vue app and we have a React app. And then I guess ideally we should fetch some data in the Astro level, in the top level, where we render both React and the Vue separately, and then pass those data to those. But let's say that we are fetching some data in React and we don't want to like move it to Astro. Is there something like Redux in this implementation so that I can just get this data from React and not pass it to the top of the app, just pass it to some part of Vue by connecting some components under Vue to that data? Is it possible?
Yeah, I would say in that case you can use the stores like in your component. I mean, in this case I'm using just to like for the users, but let's say that you have your user list and here you can use use query from React Query in case you want, and then get the data, you save it in the store, and then you have your Vue component that will listen to that nano store, and then that's it. So you can use this as your Redux. I mean, it's the state management, but in my opinion, what I like is like it's very simple. Just get and set. And then it has also good support for objects, so it's kind of optimized by key. So yeah, it is possible. They always push you to do it, not they push you, they recommend you to do it with Astro, like at the server level, so then you don't have to do it in the client. It also makes sense. So yeah, to avoid these spinners effect. So yeah, all right.
Maybe just one tiny question.
Hit it.
Okay, I'll do the passing.
So imagine you've got some e-commerce website and you got a cart or is managed built by one team, and there's something like a personal account managed by a different team. Would you recommend using atoms to communicate between these two, or would you actually do some kind of other technique? But how would one team know that there's something available to grab data from the cart? Would you share a separate library that describes all the possible atoms for this specific bit of application?
I mean, you can do that. Also here, using the idea of the atoms, in case you want to adopt a more Redux approach, you can create like your own reducer and actions and select. I mean, this is in a way a selector if you think about it. But what you're talking is about discoverability of what is in the store available.
Yeah. What can I from team A push into team B's components?
Yeah, I think that you have to create like the policy for the projects. I can see that this idea of nano stores, if it's not being handled properly, it can become wild, because it's like a global object for all your application that you can set and get derivatively. So potentially you can maybe expose it, or you can make stores by, I don't know, the department level, like component page level, and yeah, I think it really depends on.
Yeah, I'd just probably be interested in like what practice or convention. Would some team say, well, we have the special file called all the atoms exported, and then I have the cart atom, and anyone outside of this team knows, oh, that's a cart atom, we should use it, and it's fine, there's no gotchas or downsides.
Yeah, I think in this case, a good example will be to take a look at what Recall is doing, because it's the same idea. And maybe they came up with an idea for that, how to maybe structure the files, make it more, like bring more discoverability.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
So it's not really a question. I just wanted to add something, if that's all right. So at first I thought that the whole Astro proposition of mixing and matching frameworks was a rather frivolous thing, if talking about like bundle sizes alone, etc. But what I really like about it is that it can maybe serve to kind of level the playing field for new frameworks. That is, for example, if you would really like to use Solid.js because of all the nice stuff it does, but then you see the ecosystem just isn't there. It doesn't have the same component libraries as React does, for example. Like maybe you want to use 3D stuff, and React 3 Fiber is really the only game in town there. And with Astro, you can go with the Solid app and then just drop in the React runtime on the pages you need it for.
Yeah,
and that's kind of dope.
And this is what I did with the dashboard. There is not so many charts library available for Svelte, for example. And then we have recharts, which has thousands of stars on GitHub, like very well maintained as well. And then it's possible to have these charts and also with animation and everything. So yeah, I really like the idea of like starting, let's say that you really like the idea of Solid.js or Lit, just go for that and don't be, that the component shouldn't be a blocker to build an app. So yeah, all right.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely discussion, everyone. Well done.